Hey everybody, Terrio back at you. Thank you for joining in again today. Hey, I got something a little different for you guys today. Some of you may know I had a podcast. I still have a podcast called the Riff Raff. It's been around for about 7-8 years. The episodes are sometimes sporadic depending on schedule, but I've got everybody on there from Sammy Hagar to, John Schofield, Dweezil Zappa, Mike Stern, Wayne Krantz, not just guitar players, tons of great musicians are on there. All that stuff's up on my website. It's also up on the streaming services, absolutely free. There's about 50 episodes. So this is sort of a continuation, but since I'm building the channel, I thought I would broadcast the video of myself and my friend, Jerry Douglas. There are Dobro resophonic lap steel players, and then there's Jerry Douglas. He's the best in the world. He's a 16-time Grammy winner. He's recorded with everybody. I mean, almost literally everybody. It's crazy, his discography, and he's such a great musician, such a great hang. So I was in Nashville last month, and we got together to talk about his career, all these inside tips he has. You can get a lot out of this episode. And also his beautiful new record called The Set, which you guys should all check out. And great guitar player on there, Mike Seal. You guys should check all this stuff out. I hope you enjoy the episode. You're going to get a lot out of it. Here we go.
You want to play a little bit of that song? I had to write another. I wrote another verse to the end of it because it only had 2 verses.
Well, we can just play a little part of it if you want. Just something to give the people a little taste.
Okay. Yeah. So
like starting the turnaround.
I've given it up.
That's what the people want to hear.
I've given it
I'm
all
sitting
up.
here with
I wanted to hear you
friend Jerry Douglas, and thank you for being so generous with your time.
Oh, man.
Meeting me here at this swanky hotel.
Yeah, this is a nice one.
Really swanky.
They gave us the smallest room in the hotel.
It's good acoustics, though.
I think there's a Murphy bed in the wall.
It's like a New York studio apartment.
Yeah, right. or just about any hotel in New York anymore. Yeah.
But
it's nice to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Well, you guys actually asked me, but I asked a long time ago for some reason. I don't know. It just all worked out, so it's great. Your people reached out, and it's all good.
But you've been doing these since before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, I did, and they sort of hit a lull. I ran out of friends.
That can happen.
But man, we have so much we can talk about. But I think the first time, of course, I knew you're playing, and I knew about you and everything years ago. I remember reading about you in Guitar Player magazine back, I think, Fluxology or something. It was a long time.
Wow, that was a long time ago.
But I got to give a shout out to our boy Doug Belote, because Doug is a great drummer. He's a friend. He played with Jerry for many years, but it's just, this story is so funny. I got to tell it. Embellish it if you want. This is what I remember is Doug calls me up and he goes, hey, we're in New Orleans. He goes, hey man, I'm going to Nashville and I'm auditioning with this guy, Jerry Douglas. And he's I don't know if he said your name. I think he did. And I said, man, the guy's like the best dobro player in the world. He's great. I said, that'll be a great gig for you. He's like, if you go through that rank, you'll hit town with cred immediately. I told him that. So he calls me the next day and he goes, man, I went over to Jerry's house and I feel so dumb because I played with him and the first comment he told you was, man, you look really young. Like you were in those movies and you just kind of didn't say anything about it, and then finally he's like, yeah, I mean, like, Smoking the Bandit, when was that? He thought you were Jerry Reed.
No, yeah.
He's hilarious.
Yeah, it was really hilarious. He came over and he played, and we played and everything, and then he was staying at Pat's house, and our friend, another guitar player, Pat Bergeson. And he was staying at Pat's house, and he went. Pat said he got home and he said, "Hey man, I got a gig with, and he said, well, who's it with?" And he said, "Jerry Reed." He said, but he didn't. But it was real funny. The audition was real weird. He didn't play Eastbound and Down or anything from Smokey and the Bandit. He played the guitar all funny. He played it all funny. He played
didn't know
weird.
what a dobro was at all.
And he played with a slide. And Pat told him, he said, I think Jerry Reed's in the hospital. He's not doing so well. He said, you got a job with Jerry Douglas.
His dad told him that. He went and told his dad. His dad goes, you dumbass, it's Jerry Douglas.
I mean, Doug's to both of us. I mean, he's such a great friend. I mean, I love that guy. And if I had drums in my band, he'd play them.
Yeah.
But New Orleans is a magical place anyway. I mean, I fell in love with the place years and years ago. Before the first time I went there was with the Whites, with Buck White and the Down Home folks, who were called at the time. But it became the Whites, and we had hit top 10 records, country records in the 80s and early 90s, and we went to New Orleans to play, and I just thought, man, this is the greatest. And we somehow parked the bus illegally downtown somewhere on Canal or something, and then found a hotel and just went nuts for a couple of days there. But I had a girlfriend who, this is long, this is centuries ago, but I had a girlfriend who was the buyer for the gift shop the buyer for the gift shops on the Mississippi Queen and the Delta Queen.
Oh, wow.
So I would ride the boats down the river once in a while, but I just fell in love with New Orleans. And
it can be an enchanting temptress.
Yeah.
And then when you live there after a while, I mean, it gets a little frustrating sometimes.
It's like the Hunter S. Thompson thing, yeah. And there's also a negative side.
Yeah. I think it was Hemingway that said, New Orleans, what a great place to piss away your life. Believe me, man, I've been there down in the thick of it for over 25 years. I mean,
yeah, you're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, we've been living in LA for the last few years, but I still have my house there.
You did?
Yeah, and I still have my foot. I can't get over it, man.
It was a wonderful place. I just remember what a great place it was.
It is. Yeah, it can be.
It is.
I was lucky to get the very tail end of Alan and the Nevilles and all that, Mac and everybody that was left, and now it's still great, but it's those guys, they're never gonna. Yeah.
I have a similar situation. I mean, we're at this point where we're seeing those guys go away. I mean, and those were the guys we played with. Those are the guys we wanted to play with.
Right.
And they inspired us to play however we play. And we did get to play with them. That's the magic part of it. We're the bridge between those guys and the newer guys, the newer people. I mean, we're sort of in between, but we're the bridge. We're carrying forth what those guys taught us, and laying it on these young cats. And I don't think it's going to hurt them.
No, that's for sure.
I mean, I know there are all kinds of, Doug comes to mind again. It's like, hey, my red bean. It's all these kind of crazy things he would say about just about New Orleans and the characters down there. Doug, of course, is a master of impressions.
Oh yes, he is.
There's some good things about being in the music business. You meet the coolest people, and they all have a story they want to tell you.
Well, let me ask you this story, because this is kind of on what you're talking about, and I had it on my little notes.
Yeah.
And I forget who told me the story. Maybe Doug did, but there's a story about Ray Charles leaving a message on your answer machine.
Yes.
Maybe you could tell that story.
No, I was selling a house. I got in a divorce. It was horrible. I got in a divorce, and I was doing the final walkthrough on the house before I left the house forever. And the only thing, everything was gone except the phone was laying on the floor, plugged into the wall, and the phone rang. And I was just about to leave, and push the door shut for the last time. And I picked up the phone, and it was Ray Charles.
Oh,
he didn't have somebody call me.
Wow.
He had him dial, and then he picked it. Can you come down and do an overdub? And I thought, hell yeah, I can. I don't care what I'm doing right now. I'm coming down there. Yes. And so that was the last phone call I got in that house. And as soon as I hung up, I ripped the cord out of the wall just to make sure it was the last call I got in that house. But yeah, he was amazing. I watched him and Pig Robbins both playing piano at the same time, no headphones, and they're just playing, and we're tracking. But they're not hearing anybody else but the two of them. And we got in to listen back. And I had the solo in the song, but he didn't hear it until he got in there. And he said, oh, that's nice. What's that? And they said, well, that's a Dobro, Ray. And he said, oh, wow, what's that? then he did the thing, he shook hands with me, and he felt all the way up my arm to see what kind of character he's dealing with. That's what he would do. And that's what I read in his biography, that was the way he would shake hands with women too, so he could grab their wrist and see
if they had
how
any
big
hair
a gal they were, see how much hair was on their arm. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't hear that version of the story. That's cool.
But yeah, it was a funny day, and then for him to call me up again, and come to. That was just perfect, for it to be the final door pull of this house, and Ray Charles was the last guy I spoke to there. That's it.
When you did Flexology, you were really young.
Yeah.
Were your intentions more to be a solo artist, or did the studio thing kind of just happen later and you just fell into that? Or like what order did that happen? And was it all at the same time?
I started first recording with the Country Gentleman in 73, and we recorded at Vanguard Studio in New York City in Chelsea. And I had never been to New York City before. I was 17 years old. They sent me the band Country Gentleman sent me a plane ticket and a note to get in a taxi and go to this address. So I did, and it was the Chelsea Hotel in New York City.
Yeah, Sid Vicious.
In 1973.
Well, that's the thick of it, man.
Oh, man. If I'd only known. The first thing I saw was I checked in, and I sat there for a second just because the elevator door opened, and out walked this really, really tall black woman with like a Carmen Miranda fruit assortment on her head. And walked out of the elevator with this whole entourage of people who were just, partying and going out on the street. And that stuck with me for years and years and years. And then somebody asked me just like a couple years ago, they said, "Are you sure it was a woman that stepped out of there?" And I said, "Had big feet." That's all I know.
That's your first time in New York, man.
So yeah, here's New York. Welcome to New York. And that was the first time I'd ever been to New York. And I don't think I left that street the whole time we were there. I ate at the same restaurant. I was scared to death. I was in New York City, afraid, everybody told me, somebody will kill you.
Well, back then, that was a pretty shady little area, that Chelsea Hotel.
Oh, yeah, man. It was, yeah. Sid Vicious was up there. I talked to a friend of mine, Sandy Bull, who was a kind of a fringe folk artist back in that period. And he said, I was a junkie. And he said, I was living in that hotel at the time up in the, the northern floors were for those folks.
Wow.
Andy Warhol and everybody was in there. Yeah, it was
probably the first time a Dobro ever entered the Chelsea Hotel.
Without a doubt.
And last.
And the last time too. Yeah, I remember watching the roach walk on the ceiling.
Oh my God. So,
but yeah, adventures in being a musician. Yeah, I mean.
So then you were you living in Nashville then, or are you still?
No, I was still a kid in Ohio. I still had senior year of high school to go.
Wow.
At that point. So I graduated from high school and moved immediately. I turned 18 on the 28th of May, graduated from high school on like the 20th of May, and moved to Washington, D.C. immediately. Got a U-Haul trailer and took off.
Why Washington?
That's where this band was based out of. There was in the 70s, 80s, and even now, there, especially though in the 70s and 80s, there was a white collar bluegrass thing started up there, the Seldom Scene, and all those guys had jobs. One guy was a cartographer for National Geographic. Mike Aldridge was a graphic artist for the Washington Post. Or Washington Star. There was a Washington Star at that point. And they all had jobs. They didn't need to go off. I mean, John Starling was an ENT at Walter Reed Army Hospital. So sometimes he would be late getting out of surgery, and Mike Aldridge would call me, and I lived in Springfield, Virginia, and I would drive on the Beltway. You know how bad it is to drive in D.C. now, or even move
Traffic
through there.
Yeah.
So awful. I could get from Springfield to wherever the Red Fox was in Maryland, and I could get there in 30 minutes, 20 minutes, no problem. And I would play Dobro. I would play Mike Aldridge's Dobro parts. He would switch the guitar and sing the John Starling's parts, and I would be part of that band at that point. For a 17-year-old kid, that was pretty cool stuff, And just all kinds of stuff like that. And I lived on a street called Farnham Street in Springfield, Virginia, the top of the Beltway. And a few years ago, I was out at the Grammys, and Paul McCartney was the Person of the Year, and Dave Grohl was playing drums with him that night, and we were all of us were all in a big dressing room, and Dave walked by, and I said, "Warren, Ohio," and he said, "You?" And I said, "Yeah." So he sat down and we talked for a long time, and I said, "Yeah, I moved from Warren in '73. I moved to Springfield, Virginia," and he said, "Really?" He said, "I moved to Springfield, Virginia in 1973. I said, "You did?" And I said, I said, where were you? He said, "On the Farnham Street."
Oh, wow.
So he was at the other end of the street in a garage band.
Unbelievable. Learning
how to be Dave Grohl while I was playing at the other end of the street, playing in this bluegrass band and headed off all the time.
It's talking about two different worlds, right?
It's a good thing we didn't meet. A lot of things wouldn't have happened.
You might have ended up in Nirvana. You never know. Shit.
That's dangerous. They're painting a mural on the side of an Army Navy building.
That's cool. That's an honor.
Oh yeah, it's cool. It's being from a small
Who says
town.
You can't be a hero in your own hometown. There you go. You proved them wrong.
I go back every once in a while just to see what's going on there, you know.
But then you ended up down here in Nashville,
Mm-hmm.
and you became like top. I mean, how many records you played on? Over 2,000 records or something like that.
I ended up here after playing with the Country Gentlemen, then played with J.D. Crowe and the New South. They were a band out of Lexington, Kentucky that had Tony Rice was in their band and Ricky Skaggs was in the band, and it was just like for me it was a really big step up musically to go step up and play with Tony and Ricky and J.D. Crowe. That was a huge step up. I mean, the Country Gentlemen are great musicians, but this was a different kind of music, closer to what in my head I wanted to get to, because in growing up I had Flat and Scruggs in the morning, getting up to go to school, Dad's going to work, and then I'd get home that night and we weren't that far from Cleveland, so I just like listen to my radio and just listen to Cleveland rock stations all night long. And so my quandary was, how do I mix these two musics, because I like them both and I want to play them both. How do I do that at the same time? So that's what I've been working on my whole life.
Well, somewhere down the line, it was one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I went to your gig one time, BB King's in New York, and was it BB King's? No, the what's that place? The City Winery. And you did a weather report tune.
Yeah.
And I've heard you do other things that are way more more harmonically adventurous. And then, like, where did that come from? Was that later on, or were you listening to that too at the same time?
That all happened. I mean, that was it was like a day in my life that just changed everything. You know, there have been like 3 or 4 of those, but the bass player in a band that I was in with J.D. Crowe, he lived on the Lexington, on the University of Kentucky sort of grounds down there. And he took me down to his house, and that day I heard weather report, heavy weather, and Light as a Feather, Chick Corea. Mm-hmm. And I'd never heard either one of those records before, or that kind of music. Mm-hmm. And it just blew my mind. I thought, whoa, there is more. There's so much more out there. So where do you start? You know, so you start by learning their songs and then write yours. You know, so I learned. I keep telling people I want to cut every song on Heavy Weather before I die.
Really?
Yeah. I'm working on Teen Town. Ooh.
Yeah, I imagine that would be hard to play.
That was a tough one. But I did, that day turned me around and gave me something else to aspire to, you know, than to be a bluegrass musician, because there's so much more out there. And I was already trying, building an encyclopedia that would allow me to play both, learning lots of stuff, listening to Clapton, listening to Jeff Beck, and listening to Jimmy Page, and I had James Gang, right out of Cleveland, so I could hear Joe, and at that time you could hear Joe live, and it was just crazy, and so I was trying to figure out how to make all these musics work together, and that's what I've been doing all this time. I don't know, I'm still working on it. Still working on that stuff. And I started to write things like that had 5 different time signatures in one song.
And when you write things, you're primarily self-taught, right?
I am.
And then when you write, we're going to talk about your record, The Set, but when you write, because you have a wide discography, when you hand music, how does it work with your musicians? Do you write charts, or you just send them? What kind of charts? Are they number charts, or you write the notation, like some of those lines?
I don't write notation, so they're usually number charts, and it even to the point where I haven't written the charts yet. I'll sit down with one of the guys in the band and we'll chart it out.
I see.
And so I can remember all the parts, and they can be charting while I'm trying to remember, and all these things. And I do. In my studio, just kind of hit record and just play, you can play all day.
Yeah.
And you got it all, and you
Yeah.
can go back through it and review it and pull things out of it. That's a lot of songs that I write begin as exercises.
Could you give me the examples?
Like there's a song called that I wrote. It's called "We Hide and Seek," and it's got a. And the main part goes. And it just it just keeps going beautiful. Like that. But it started. This was an exercise. And so I showed it to Bela, and he had trouble with it. So I knew I was onto something.
Some serious right hand.
Yeah.
Right there, man.
Well, it's there are certain Dobro rolls that are just muscle memory to me, and it's a lot like banjo, only it's upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Like banjo players, you have a drone string, their fifth string, that can. Mine's my first string, so that string will fill a space, that's got a big hole in it. All of a sudden, in the incremental way you set out the notes, that note, my first string is kind of a filler in the rolls that will fill up a space. See, I'm here. I'm using that string as a filler, but it's part of the triad as well.
It's the meat of it, yeah.
So it's that's something that I learned early on. That was one of the first building blocks that I remember running into, even as a kid playing, where I knew I was onto something, because I could keep this roll going and play the melody at the same time, like a banjo player, but I'm looking at it like it's upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're trying, my thumb is like a free agent,
Mm-hmm.
That's my lead guy, runs around, and these other two finger picks that I have on my hand are the fill in the meat. They fill in the spaces and add the extra song, add the extra notes that go along with the thumb lead. It's an interesting instrument, because there's no other instrument that's tuned like it, or it's tuned, it's just octaves, 2 octaves, and it's got such sustain.
Yeah.
It's a great instrument to use with singers. And it's just it has a beautiful tone, and some the best note you can play, we both know, is no note at all. But
why is that?
Sometimes
you lay out.
Sometimes you get a good thing going with the vocal, and you'll just kind of like all of a sudden just leave a space.
Oh yeah, for playing with singers.
And that's what I'm really talking about, playing for singers, because it'll make everybody really it accents what they said
that
last.
space in between the notes. I always ask, especially girl singers, is it too loud enough?
Enough.
It's my line.
Yeah. I'm going to use it. Backing up singers, it's also, I learned a very important thing really early on. I was working on an Emmylou Harris record. This was like Roses in the Snow or something way back there. And I was working with Brian Ahern. Her husband was this genius engineer. He taught so many of us so many things about when what to play when. But he said I did a take and I got all the way through it and was kind of sitting there patting myself on the back, and he said, "Don't play in her register when she's singing." And I went, "Oh yeah, makes total sense. We're just kind of canceling each other out."
Yeah.
So let me get down out of her range and leave her alone and just fill in between her comments to keep the conversation going. That's kind of what backup is all about, is to continue the conversation but not bend it in any way.
Right.
It's just sort of be Switzerland between lines.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's what I've learned about that, and it's served me pretty well.
That's
that are really important that people don't usually tell you in a normal session. You just go through it and they sort it later, But I want to do it right the first time.
Was there a point where you ever, you had your solo career, or when you were building your solo career, and you were like the really in-demand session guy, you were doing all these sessions. Was there a point where you were just so burnt out on doing studio work? Or probably several times in your career, I would imagine, right?
Well, the biggest one, I was pretty burnt out. It was 1998. I was in the studio producing a band, and Alison Krauss called me and said, that one of the guys in the band was leaving, and they didn't know if they were going to continue on as a band. But would I go out for a couple of weeks while they did these dates that they had, and just see how it all felt, because I'd played on her records, I'd produced her records, so I went out with them, and about 4 days in, they were like all around me going, "Would you just stay? Could you see yourself staying in this situation?" And I called home and talked to my wife about it for a minute, but it didn't take long. It was just something. It was such a musical, nirvana to me as a player who can express himself doing solos, and there are all these great songs and this wonderful voice that gave me another choice to back up a beautiful voice, and there are ways to ghost her in situations where it sounds like another voice, because it's a dobro, because it's got all this sustain, so I can just come up out of nowhere and just kind of like live with her for a line and then disappear again. So there's a lot of thinking that goes into this, when you back up and really take it into account. But that was it. I was so burnt out.
Just creatively burnt out, or just
creatively burnt out? I was wondering. It was to the point where I was wondering, had I played this song for another artist, last week or the week, I could not remember, or had I played this? I was afraid of just playing the same solo for somebody and not remembering, and because there are only so many notes and there are only so many melodies, and don't play the same one twice, and trying to keep track of that over all of these recordings was hard to do. So it was I loved recording. I loved the whole microscopic part of recording and all the things you can do, but I was so tired of it. I was just so tired of going to the studio. I needed to be in one place for a while, and it wasn't just being home. That was great. Being home every night was wonderful, but I really missed the camaraderie of being in a band, and I was burnt out on playing on everybody else's record, and I'm going, well, none of this is going into my column, really. You know, I'm a studio musician, and that's what you are. And I wanted my own career path, and to play the songs that I write, and then Alison called, and that would be the only thing that would be the only band, only music that I would be that interested in, to just drop everything and go do that.
Serious thing, yeah.
But it could, because it was a step into another zone that I'd never been in.
Yeah.
You know, just the whole, not such a lot, not really a lifestyle change, but just being happy with the music, you know, every day. You know, or trying to figure out a way to make it better. And that band sounded like a record every show.
Oh yeah,
it was amazing. So I just and we're about to go back out again. We've recorded 2 records.
You've been doing this at Neil's Capolino's.
We've been at Neil Capolino's at the Doghouse.
Friend of ours, yeah.
And we also recorded a lot at Sound Emporium with Gary Pachosa.
Oh yeah.
And then Neil would go through all of the vocals and all the fixes and everything like that, and then we'd just fire it back to Gary Pachosa, and he'd mix it, you know. And it's beautiful. So
I can't wait to hear it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your record, man, the new one, The Set, and I listened to it quite a few times. It's so beautiful. Almost soundtrack-ish, but like the playing is so beautiful, and it just puts you in a trance. My wife and I have been listening to it all last 2 days in the hotel.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Thanks.
And
Thanks.
of course, you always surround yourself with great musicians as well, your band. And
I'm so happy with the way everything sounds. I mean, with Mike Steele playing electric on the, you know, he hardly ever plays acoustic at all. I mean, I figure in our band, I'm the guitar player.
Oh.
I'm the acoustic guy. He's the electric guy. Got Christian Settlemeyer, who can get up above all of us with the violin, and then Daniel Kimbrough's down there in his own little world, you know. And Mike and I just have to keep an eye on each other so we're not playing in the same place.
Well, I mean,
so
it sounds
spread it.
perfect. I mean, and Mike's a great. I've met him. He's a really great player, and Guthrie too. I know the lineage of guys you have. You know, they're all great guitar players. But like when you record a piece, the 5th Season was one. Like a piece like that. Are you using a click track to hold it together, or you're just kind of playing it all?
We didn't use a click track.
Wow, that's amazing.
We didn't use a click track, and that's a piece that I wrote for a festival called Fresh Grass. That's in Mass Mocha. It's up in the Berkshires up there, and at one time it's an old factory building, and at one time they made ceramic tubes for, you know, all kinds of things, probably for, you know, all the great microphones in the world, you know, all these great tubes. And then they did some work on the atomic bomb too, originally, was done up there. And, you know, as well as Oak Ridge here in Tennessee. But so I wrote that, and it wasn't weird enough, so I called Mike, had him come over, and we you know, just the segues from one piece into another, and do we need this piece there? You know, we kind of put the puzzle together, because I had all these pieces written, and then I got him over, and we made a couple of them weirder, and then we got in the studio. Everybody had something to say, so it's really everybody's song.
It's a band kind of thing. I like the way you.
It starts out that way, but I'm willing to give these guys. You know, it's another thing about this record. I made sure that there was a cut on the record by each of them that they'd written, and it was their song, and those are some of the best songs in the record. But people were coming up to me every night going, "Where can I get this song? This song that you played?" And I said, "Well, it's on one record, and then all these are on all different records, you know." And so I decided to cut cut the set list.
Oh, that's why it's. I was going to ask you. I figured it was something to do with your live performance. So that's the set.
Everybody was leaving and going, where can I find this? Where can I find this? And they're all on different records, and some of them we didn't have. Some of them are out of print. So I thought, I'm going to cut these. I mean, especially the stuff we did for MCA Master Series. That's all. As soon as Tony Brown left there, it was over. They shelved everything. And so you can't get those records really anymore. So I thought, I'm going to recut them. I like them. I know them better now. When you write a song, you go take it in the studio and you record it, you don't know it. Mm-hmm. And after a year of playing it, you go, why didn't I wait and do this? So that's the point I'm at with a lot of these songs, is they've come to full fruition, and especially with this band, the way this band dynamically works together, I really like the way they sound. I really like the way the songs lay, and they say what they're supposed to say. And so we cut the whole thing out at Grandpa Jones's old house in Springfield, Tennessee, up close to the Kentucky border. I mean, nobody was going to just appear. It's not a destination for people out of town. Exactly. So we were sequestered there. We just hung out and made the record and just kept a solid groove going.
That's a great way to do it, man. Yeah.
But I've been thinking about the way we make records in it, and I wonder why we make 10-song records anymore.
It just should be like EP kind of things.
I think so. Or the Beatles would put out a single, and see if that stuck. If it didn't go on the record. And what we do anymore is I think the record companies, they're all hurting because they've spent all this money, on records that didn't recoup, and then tried to make it back on some that did, but I just don't see a reason to make 10-song records now that we are a streaming society.
Mm-hmm. And the lack of attention span anyway, average person is...
Yeah, and what they're hearing is like 1/7 or 1/11, I've even heard, of what actually exists there. When you get it down to an MP3...
the quality of the...
The quality suffers, and you're not really hearing the whole instrument. You're not hearing everything that was done, and that's a shame. So that's why I like vinyl. I love vinyl.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds so good. It's got air.
Especially an instrument like that. That's so, the frequency it's so wide. The range of that instrument, mm-hmm. It's just really beautiful. All that mid range and stuff, and vinyl.
Yeah, it's it's a constant fight on stage with guitar players, or I've just sort of found a way to stay out of the way, separate the instrument. That's the cool part about the Dobro guitar, or resophonic guitar, is you can wait. You can hit a note and wait. You don't have to play another one immediately.
It's a filter guitar.
It's a filter guitar.
We should talk about Joe real quick, but Jerry and I have a mutual friend, rest his soul, Joel Sonnier, the great Cajun singer, legendary Cajun singer, and Jerry knew him a lot longer than I did, but Joel had they called him Joelisms, right?
Yeah.
Like the floor tom was the big round, and Tang the Hump is the famous one.
Tang the Hump.
Or Bell of the Ride symbol.
Yeah, right.
And I had produced Joel's record, and it actually won it was nominated for a Grammy, and Joel said, "I'm going over to Los Angeles, and if I win that Grammy, I'm gonna go up to that totem pole and make a speech." Talking about the podium. And so Jerry texted me. He was at the Grammys. I'm sure you won 2 or 3 Grammys that year.
I was watching him.
You were watching when you texted me. You said, "Congratulations, you just won. Joel just went up to that totem pole." It's so great.
He was the happiest guy in that place.
I still have that text. It's so I saved that screenshot. Oh man.
He called me up one time and he said, Jerry, I need to talk to, I need the phone number of a guy named T-Bone Burnett. And I said, he said, because he's making a movie down here called Ya Ya something. Ya Ya Sisterhood. And he said, and he needs to know me because I am the Cajun Encyclopedia.
Yeah, he wasn't lying.
He wasn't lying. And I put him in touch. I don't know if it ever happened, but I know T-Bone knew Joel from L.A.
Yeah, because he had Garth Fundus and Albert Lee and the guys from Little Feat were in his band, and Joel had like this Rain Man sort of life. He was such a child, like he was, he didn't speak English until he was, I think, a teenager, and then he really was you were talking about lineage. Joel was really the last generation of someone that could write a Cajun song, and all in Cajun was his native language. It's not like Zachary Richard is an example of somebody that learned it later on. He was immersed in it, but Joel was basically, that's the last generation.
He was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
And then he's gone, but he had those stories where what was another one? Doug's dad, they drove him to California, but they stopped like maybe 10 miles away from their house to gas up in Lafayette. And they said, Joel, we're going inside to buy some cigarettes and some drinks. Don't move. Just stay right here. So he rolls down the window and this woman walks away. Excuse me, man. How much further to California?
Got out of Lafayette.
Still to Lafayette. Or he went on the what was it, Nashville Now, or whatever. And the guy goes, well, Joel, how'd you make it up here to Nashville? He goes, well, I came with my friend. I rode with him. He was so innocent, But he loved you, man. He would always talk about Jerry. I gotta call Jerry.
Well, he was just such a sweet guy, and it was like he was saying things, and you paid attention when he spoke because there was something you were going to take out of there to tell somebody else because it was just he spoke another language. He was an original. And there was a story about him doing. I think it was here. When they cut Tear Stained Letter on that session, I think it was John Jarvis was playing piano. This is the way I heard this story was they were trying to cut a song and they were having a lot of trouble with this song of cutting it because tempo and feel and all kinds of things, and so they decided to go just take lunch and then come back and hit it again. So they were all in line at one of these meet and three places here we have in Nashville, and they're all standing in line looking at all this food and waiting, trying to choose what they're going to have to eat. And Joel, they're in line, and Joel looked at John Jarvis, and he said, that song, he said, count it off. And John went, 1, 2, he said, no, in your mind. So John's thinking it. He said, it's too fast. The song's too fast. And he said, count it off in your mind. And John started counting, and Joel said, see? It was just like...
Yeah, he would tell me the filter guitar and you're going to put that enhancement on it.
That enhancement, that's what I was trying to remember.
And then the filter guitar. Let's put that filter. Yeah, Joel, we're going to put... An overdub was a filter guitar. But anyway. But, Jerry, your record is so great. The set, I mean, we could talk about more, but I think we're almost out of time. But like, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, you guys should check that out. Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks.
I mean,
thanks. I don't know why I never played that song before.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard it all my life, but I just thought, well, it's probably been overplayed. Everybody's played this song. Everybody knows this song. That. But then when I just played it, it laid so well. It was just like it's an A. It just lays well. So I thought I'm going to play the melody because I love the melody, and then I started playing it as as a piece on this thing I do called Transatlantic Sessions in Scotland, and I was opening up the second set. I always get to play my song on the first song of the second set, so I was playing that, and I talked to Eric Clapton, and I said he wanted to play a song with us on the show when we got to London. I said, yeah, come on down. And he'd been to 5 or 6 different. Every time we played there, Clapton would show up.
Wow!
And with his daughters really pulled him in, and his wife, just beautiful bunch of people. And he got up to play with us, and I said, well, I'm playing this song. You want to play this with me? And he said, yeah, I'll just play that with you. And then we'll do this other song called Sam Hall. It's like an old Irish protest song. And I produced that for his new record.
Wow.
So I brought all the Transatlantic guys down to Abbey Road, to the Beetle to Be, and we went in there and cut that song.
Man,
and
that's
a couple of other things. But yeah, Clapton's been a good, he's championed the Transatlantic Sessions, has told everybody else about it. I expect to see Ronnie Wood show up anytime, you know. I just wish he would and just, He actually did play on one song we did that we cut during that session with Eric, and Ronnie just came around the corner. He just lives around the corner from the studio. Just walked in, and he was totally dressed in Rolling Stones stuff. Like he'd fallen into the merch tent or something.
Really,
he came out with all this stuff on. And we were just having the best time. And I didn't have him on in my box listening back when we were cutting the track.
Yeah.
When you have to walk up this big set of stairs to get to the control room in that studio in Abbey Road. So we walked up there and we're listening back, and all of a sudden I hear, and I went, "That's the fucking Rolling Stones." I was, and I thought that's the coolest thing I've ever heard, and it's in the perfect place, and it sounds so great. And what it was just such a nice surprise though. Wow. And he hung out with us all day long. And it was really fun hanging out with Eric and Ronnie, and then went to a noodle place with them and listened to them talk about. I said, "What was it like coming to America? The first time you came to America to play for Americans?" And Eric said, well, "We were just selling the blues back to the Americans. Is what we were doing. We were playing on music they'd forgotten about." And he's right, and he said they had Jefferson Airplane. They were playing in San Francisco, and we got into that, but we were really just playing the blues.
Yeah.
And but it was going to a noodle shop and listening to those two guys talk about a place they had to come back to, like we have the Station Inn here in Nashville, this little dive that all bluegrass musicians will fall back into at some point. They had this place in London, I can't remember the name of it, but they'd all show up. That's where they saw Jimmy play.
The Marquee Club or something.
I think that's what it was, but they'd all rush back to London to all show up, and just hang out together. It must have been, it would have been a great place for one of us to just show up for one night with a tape recorder.
Yeah.
But I just remembered it. I just thought, man, who else gets to sit and listen to this guys like this talk about things like this? It's a big history lesson.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I'm sure they enjoy, what you do is so unique. I mean, I'm sure they get a lot out of it.
It's been really nice working with them and for them to invite me in and take me in like that. I feel a real special kinship to those guys, because they were the ones made me like this kind of music that's tortured me my entire life. But I thank them all for it.
Well, Jerry, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you have stuff to do, but thank you.
Thank
it was
you.
Really fun, man. I think I got plenty. We could just keep going, I'm sure.
I just like hanging out. Next time you come back, you got to come out the house.
I know, man. I'd love
hang out and take it easy.
I'd love to. All right. Well, that's a good note to end on, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.